Hello, I'm Jeff Sokol. I'm a member of the TCA Environmental Committee. Catherine Wilson, the Environmental Committee Chair, and Vishan Thompson, TCA Coordinator, and myself are pleased to be part of today's presentation. Our speakers will provide valuable information about smart building technologies, green building programs, and funding incentives, and sustainable initiatives. If you have any questions, please put them in the question section and not the chat. So away we go. As Director of Digital Buildings at Cisco Canada, Bill MacGowan has gained considerable knowledge in the area of converged building technologies, enterprise integration, and the delivery of high-performance business values. With 30 years of experience in new construction and the retrofit industry, we consider Bill a valuable source on the opportunities and advantages of digital buildings. Brandy Burdeniuk is the Chief Customer Officer at Green Business Certification Inc. Canada, known as GBCI Canada. He's responsible for advancing green buildings and business processes nationally through trusted programs for Canada's building environment. Brandy's background is in industrial design, and for nearly 2 decades, she's been a catalyst for creating, living, working, and thriving in healthy, sustainable buildings. We'll start with Bill. Go right ahead.
So Jeff, have you just given me the talking stick? Is that just what happened? You
That's
did.
True.
You did. Okay, excellent. And Jeff, can you see my screen okay? Are we good?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay, well, listen, Jeff and the entire TCA group, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And for everyone that is connected virtually, appreciate your interest in joining. And I'm thrilled to be tag teaming with Brandy. So we're really breaking this session into 2 key components that Jeff mentioned. I'm going to lead off around smart buildings, and then Brandy's going to double click on sustainability. The 2 pieces go hand in hand. And to start off here is, in my 40 minutes of the presentation, is I'm going to share with the group, some personal thoughts. I'm also going to talk a bit about our strategy from a Cisco perspective around smart buildings. I'll talk about some global trends, and these trends we are viewing very key because they shape how we're going to be doing R&D investment in the products that we build. But also these trends are trends that will be affecting everyone on the call here, both from a personal perspective and from a business perspective. I'll talk about a couple of project examples, and then I'll close off on some of the mechanics on how we work with the design, construct, and building community, and then we'll turn it over. But much of the discussion will be centered around this concept of digitization. I lead the smart buildings practice. I'm not an IT individual like people think of Cisco and IT. I actually come from the facilities side of the world. So the focus will be on digitization of real estate. And what I would encourage everyone as we go through this presentation is, you might be everyone is involved in the design, construct, and operate side of the house, but when you're thinking about a building, think about everything in the building as a technology data platform. And when I suggest that, it could be building automation, lighting, or security. It could be the skin of the building. It could be elevator control. So everything's a technology platform, and these data platforms blend together to drive the value of smart buildings. At Cisco, we are constantly, re-looking at our strategy, our go-to-market, and what you see here is really a summary slide on our go-to-market. So, at large, across all customer types, commercial, education, public sector, factory floor, smart cities, the healthcare industry. What we're being asked to do is help customers, number one, connect. And as they connect, secure their connection. And then whatever they do within business is automate process. And as they automate, there is the whole concept of going from a physical to a digital world. And much of what will happen from a compute, from an analytics perspective, from a capabilities perspective, will be hosted in a cloud, right? So this strategy is really shaping, our go-to-market and really our next 3 years. It's important to note that there's been some fundamental shifts in the market in the last year. I'm sure we all feel the shifts, but many businesses that were very physical in nature are moving towards a digital first model. And I'll talk more about that. And we're a technology company. Sometimes people refer to us as the plumbers of the internet, but it's interesting in the last year that companies are now going to be accelerating their investment in technology, in a variety of different technologies. So buildings are really starting to go from static to dynamic. And so the investment in technology is really fundamental for businesses to stay abreast, to be competitive, to differentiate. When we think about buildings, and again, buildings have different shapes and flavors. It could be, again, a hospital, a new university building. It could be a new high-rise commercial. Maybe it's multi-res. But the important thing to note is that people, when they're involved in meetings, there is going to be a high percentage of meetings that will be connecting from the home to the place of work. And again, today we're on Zoom. It's a platform that allows us to connect, but the idea that home connection is going to be so strong moving forward will force us to relook at how buildings are being designed from a floor plate point of view, from a square footage point of view, and how they're going to be operated. Okay. And probably the biggest trend that's important to us and everyone here is in the next 3 years, you can see the stats, the explosion of mobile apps. And so when you're thinking about, physical space, you'll be interfacing with that space. It could be from an operations point of view. It could be from a personal experience, wayfinding, room booking. It's going to be riding on the top of an app. And by firmly understanding that apps will be the way in which we interface, will allow everyone on the call here to position accordingly. So those are some of the primary trends. Some of the building trends. I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm very interested in some fundamental trends that are going to be shaping buildings, the physical form itself. Very, very interested in power generation. So you can see buildings are going to now be adopting more integration to photovoltaics, or it could be renewables, as we see in the Tesla Gigafactory here. There is so much conversation going on right now about the electrification across everything we do, the movement from gas to electricity. Because I'm an electrical engineer and much of what we do at Cisco is driven by electricity, this trend is really driving sustainability. It's driving the reduction of carbon footprint. And Brandy will pick up a bit on this on the second part of the conversation. Again, within buildings and within systems within buildings. There's this massive requirement for more speed, lower latency. So that's front and center for Cisco. And then a lot of discussion is going on specific to edge computing. So I may have, a specific air handler. It could be a pumping system. It might be smart elevators or vending machines. Much of how those devices and those systems do their day-to-day work, instead of being reliant on some centralized compute, the intelligence and data analytics will move to the edge, and that will shape how we're designing and constructing. So putting the old Cisco hat on here, the primary pillars that are driving us and how we partner with customers, and we're just a small piece of the puzzle, is big fixation on agile networks. We're going to be optimizing the experience through applications. The discussion of future work, we call it hybrid work, will change how buildings are being designed. Of course, we're the plumbers of the internet, so a lot happening there. The idea that we're all connected and everything on the planet will be connected, raises the question on security, end-to-end security. And then again, as I mentioned, it's the whole discussion of, capabilities, to the edge. So on a day-to-day basis, and when I first met Jeff, is we talked about real estate, and our mission statement, both nationally and globally, is we're looking at reducing the friction within design, build, and operate. And this is through digitization. And friction, the reduction of friction will allow buildings to move from static to programmable. So we envision that buildings with the correct technology investment will almost look like an iPhone, where you'll be able to reprogram the building based on change of use, energy profiles, and that you won't over time have to do a lot of heavy lifting on refit or renovation. So programmability is critical. And when we start our discussions with groups that are responsible for designing or renovating new buildings, we always have a discussion focused on these 5 primary pillars. Can we reduce CapEx? Is it material cost reduction? Is it labor reduction? The answer is yes. Energy is taking on the whole discussion around greening, carbon footprint reduction, and Brandy will double click on the energy. But again, the concept is lowering footprint. Security is actually picked up in 2 fronts. One would be physical security, security of assets, but more importantly now it's data security. How do I protect my organization, my people, data governance? So we're heavily invested in security. That is rising. And then the 2 remaining pillars, the idea of utilization. Do I need to use less space or more space? And you can see space allocation changing, especially with COVID, physical distancing. But then when I talk to customers around experience, I ask them the question, if you build a new building, will anyone come? Will they come to this hospital? Will they come to this new library? And if you don't get the experience piece correct, then much of your investment and all your energy is for naught. And again, what we do is when we start our journey, we get front-end loaded. Historically, IT has been very back-end loaded late in the game, and we're moving much earlier into this discussion in the strategy phase. We're at the table with a variety of stakeholders, architects, engineers, constructors, HR, digitization officers. We move through design, construct, and operate. And the earlier that, in fact, everyone on the call here gets engaged on the project, the value rises. And that's where the excitement in the industry is. I think one of the things that we're going to be doing after the call here is sharing our presentations, but this is actually a little worksheet that I will use early on in the discussion. I'd ask everyone sort of to fill it in, give it a try, but what we actually do here is when we're looking at a project, what is the value driver? Is it energy? Is it CapEx? Is it experience? Is it security? And we'll go through an exercise, a design thinking exercise. We'll layer down value drivers, we'll create some use cases, and then we'll determine who really cares, who are the stakeholders that are interested in the value drivers. And then when I think about data platforms, we'll start detailing both IT data platforms and OT data platforms. And I'll get a bit into that. And then we use this as a matrix on how to start building plans and specifications. Much of my time is spent around Internet of Things. A great stat is the explosion of devices. It's almost going to be 4 devices per capita on the planet. When I think about buildings, I do think about Internet of Things more to do with sensing on me, sensing of smart garbage cans, smart toilets, lots of work going around on furniture that wants to communicate. We're doing some interesting work with Apple and mining the data from the watch. An example could be healthcare data. It could be used to turn on a new sequence within a patient room. And then last but not least is the skin of the building is now becoming dynamic. And it's important to note that the skin can create opacity changing or power generation. And so all these different systems are beginning to integrate and converge and create new use cases. In fact, much of the work that we're doing around next generation collaboration is when I walk into a room, the room will listen to me, will see me, will perceive my needs, and the room will automatically set up to my persona so I can do better work, higher productivity, right? So this idea of connection of systems and data then leads to the idea of having mobile applications. And one of the groups that we work with is AppSpace. It's a mobile application platform, and it allows me to, on my mobile device, book a room, find a room, wayfinding, get notices of this room is clean, this room is occupied. And again, this is really in tune with the idea that we need a mobile app as we're moving through space. The other thing I'd like to point out is there are a number of organizations that are embracing smart buildings, and a subset of smart buildings is sustainability. So we're doing a lot of work with CSA around next generation converged infrastructure. It really sort of boils down to the anatomy of a building. I'll have systems on the right that are very IT centric from a tenant perspective. But then there'll be people on the call that are focused on lighting and metering and HVAC. And those systems historically have been disparate systems, but along comes Internet Protocol, and the IP is creating this convergence and the ability for systems to communicate. And if we take a look at an architecture, and this could be layered on to any type of building that we're interested in, it's the classic sensing at the edge. The sensing moves data to systems. And again, at Cisco, what we're doing is partnering with all different companies that are experts in these systems. And then the role that we bring to the table is through this converged IP network. And so we can move data securely and easily between systems or even up into third-party applications. Again, we are just simply a piece of the puzzle here. The other thing that is really important to note is some of the work that CSA is doing around in-building DC microgrid. And this is just clearly focused on carbon reduction and energy footprint and greening of buildings. And it really boils down to the fact that if you can move infrastructure off of AC and move it to DC, there is a massive power reduction or power savings that occur. And the piece that Cisco brings to the table here is we're very focused on power over Ethernet, the delivery of power and comm across low voltage ICAT infrastructure. The interesting thing across time has been the fact that as time has advanced, more power is being delivered securely across infrastructure. And we started off originally at 15 watts, and now we're driving 90 watts of power across our architectures. And you can see in these verticals, hospitality, healthcare, and retail, originally based on lower power values, the number of edge devices or Internet of Things devices that could be connected were limited. You know, lighting, phones, medical devices, but with the advent of higher power levels occurring, we're now seeing higher power devices collapsing and riding on top of infrastructure. And this idea of convergence and DC delivery is creating a big uptick in power savings, CapEx savings, and it's actually realizing new business value. In this case, to retail, is increase of indoor sales. So the role that we play is a piece of the puzzle in that architecture. I know some people on the call, and I was speaking with Jeff and Vishan early on, we used to use Water Park Place 3 as our demo site at our headquarters. We will be going back to the office, but these are some photos that I took about 6 years ago during construction, where we highlighted the fact that the building automation in the upper left and the lighting on the lower left, we actually moved off of AC power and dropped those primary OT systems onto structured cabling. And it helped us realize much of the benefits in the areas of energy reduction, capex reduction, and the ability to integrate and create new experiences on our floor plate. But we will get back to the office, and I welcome everybody on the call here to come down for a tour when that happens. Now, I know Brandy's going to be double clicking on these certifications. We, from a manufacturing and an R&D perspective, are building products that will drive scoring capabilities, whether it be with a US GBC or WELL, and one of the standards that's very important to us is wired score. So much of what we do from a design of product and also deployment of product will allow people to more easily secure these certs for these projects, which I think is invaluable. And one of the projects that I want to highlight here, and I expect that people on the call today are part of ASHRAE. For people that aren't, ASHRAE stands for Association of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. They are a global standards body. They're very focused on the design and operations of mechanical systems. It could be airflow, it could be pumping of water. They are very focused on sustainability, wellness, greening, performance. And so we had the opportunity about a year and a half ago to get on the design team to work with them and the other partners that they had selected to actually renovate their headquarters building in Atlanta, Georgia. And it got stood up last November, and the building itself and all the subsystems, whether it be IT or OT, are riding on top of a Cisco Smart Building infrastructure, which we actually refer to as the fourth utility, and you can see this on the right-hand side. Very exciting building. It will be a living lab. Many people from architects, MEPs will be using this building to advance performance of their projects. And the other piece that is really quite exciting is ASHRAE is on a journey now to determine its role in the idea of building performance and greening on a global basis, and they put together a vision statement, a working group called Vision 2030. This is live information. Anyone can access it, but this Vision 2030 will really shape how buildings will be designed, constructed, and operated. So we're thrilled to be, part of the ASHRAE team here. So we've talked a bit about trends and some of my personal stories and product platforms. People will say to me, geez, I'd like to have one smart building, Bill. And sometimes customers will ask if they could buy a smart building from Cisco, which is kind of humorous. And I'll say, well, no, we don't do that. But if you need assistance on the design, we'd certainly be pleased to be part of. So what I'm going to do is just talk about one use case that everyone is talking about, regardless of vertical, is it safe to come back to the office? And what do I actually do in order to ensure safety for my people when they make the return? And so let me just step you through really how we're getting our arms around addressing that big use case. Everyone recognizes the specification layout through CSI. These are just sort of a subset of the different sections. As I mentioned earlier on before, the lens we look through is that every system in a building is now a smart system, an intelligence system, a data platform. And so what we're now doing is looking at each section, door hardware, furnishing, fire alarm, BAS, electrical, and we're looking at all these systems and determining what data could be exported from those systems and could be used in the creation of new use cases. So we're constantly looking at different spec sections. We are working with customers and our partners to detail out use cases. And there's a variety of different use cases. It could be comfort, it could be mobility, it could be performance use cases. This Excel spreadsheet, sort of little drop down, it'll indicate if I select a specific use case, then I need to work on different integration strategies or sequences of operations. So we go through use case development. And because we're talking about back to work safely, sort of the horizon that we're looking at around back to work is sort of broken into 3 blocks that you see here. Today, it's about the trusted workspace. You can see that there's the little symbol of Wi-Fi connectivity that gives us this connection component. But as we move from left to right, what you'll start noticing is that there's more technology being layered on. In the middle case, there's the layering on of video conferencing. There's the layering on of the ability to adjust workspace footprint over time. And then if we move to the right, there's a number of new devices that are showing up. Photovoltaics, smart mechanical systems, the idea that I'll be bringing people in remotely, and the concept that everything on the floor plate will be addressable and smart and can be programmed, whether it's the blinds, lighting, temperature, can be programmed to my persona. And this journey is allowing us to work with others to define specifications that once turned on will, deliver the value that customers are expecting. Cisco, we have a bunch of product and software that is a component of architecture. So we have collaboration products, security products, infrastructure, data center, and mobility. We're not going to drill down into these different architectures, but I want to point out the fact that within our architectures, we have embedded data that can be mined to address use cases. And the back to office use cases that are being talked about and asked for and turned on is broken into these 4 pillars. The proximity, do I have that 6-foot, perimeter? Where do I gather the data to protect myself from proximity? On the bottom of piece of the slide, there's different Cisco products that deliver data. Could be contact tracing, same thing. We have systems that can provide the data that could be used by others to ensure, contact tracing is turned on. We have one partner in particular that has a series of luminaires that when turned on will be used for UVC disinfection, right? So another use case that is a component of our architectures. And then probably the biggest one is that's being talked about now is space analytics. How do I know that my space is being used correctly? How do I find a room? Is the room been cleaned? And from there, you can get better performance on the floor plate. Again, I mentioned that we're just a part of the puzzle. We have global partners that we go to market with. This is just a very small list of partners. But again, the combination of us and our eco partners allows us to deliver new value to the end customer. We encapsulate this all within specifications. We spent a bunch of time in Division 27. We work with customers to build out IT/OT architectures. It's just sort of a sample here. And then how we round off everything is everything that we do within Cisco is built around the concept of circular economy. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. Going from linear, I take it, I make it, I dispose it. Now, what I'm now doing with the products that we're delivering to the marketplace, of course we make it and we use it, but we're going to reuse and recycle. And waste to us is now one of the new resources that companies can leverage. And when we think about the different verticals that we play in and every step that we take, whether it be from design or creating solutions across smart cities, smart mining, healthcare, education, it's with the concept that we are going to be working within an ecosystem that impacts operations. And then if you go around the circle here, you'll see this 100% from a plastics, recycling point of view. So all our products are moving through this cycle and coming back to us, and then we repurpose and do the journey again, which has a big impact on the greening of the planet. And just sort of one last comment here is the fact that all our employees, this is 70,000 of us, we are engaged with the Earth Aware Pledge. It's tied to World Wildlife Foundation, and so mentally and how we go to work on a day-to-day basis is tied to sustainability. All projects will require this concept of master technology integration to bring the world of mechanical and electrical together. This is a new skill set, a new opportunity, smart building integration. We're seeing that showing up in specifications, here to help. And again, because of IoT, there is an explosion to ensure that cybersecurity is the wrapper around everything we do. So just in closing, our focus to date has been on CIOs. They now are at a pivotal position where they're going to transform their infrastructure, both from the IT and the OT side of the house. They also have the opportunity now to get involved very early in projects at the strategy phase. And this is how we're going to be bringing value, both to Canada and globally. And so with that, the digitization of the real estate is foundational, and it's also foundational to our drive to sustainability. And with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'm going to now turn it over to Brandy to do a deep dive on sustainability. So Brandy, I'll stop sharing and over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. That was fantastic. I am going to pick up on a few things that you mentioned, but I also took a couple slides out because you and I have so much stuff in common, which is great. So let me just share my screen here and then we'll get going. Great. Get rid of that. If I go like that, can you see just the slide or can you see all the notes as well?
Yeah, we're seeing the notes slide also, Brandy. So I think if you go into, like, there's a presentation where you can just eliminate presenter view.
Yeah. Apologies,
I have the same
everyone.
thing too. Yeah, exactly. That's the one.
Okay. Well, I'll just present without notes, which I'm entirely okay with. All right, so part of what I'm going to share with you today, and let me just start my timer, because goodness knows I could speak forever. So just before we hop into sort of the meat and potatoes of some of the good things that I'm seeing in the trends, both nationally, locally, and globally around smart and sustainable buildings, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, because I know that some of you haven't had a chance to meet with a lot of folks lately, and that sort of get to know you piece of what we do every day sometimes gets lost with the virtual environment that we're in. So bear with me as I tell you a little bit about some of the context of where I come from and why I am so deeply passionate about this connection between smart and sustainable projects. So I got to tell you a few biases and a few stories along the way. So I don't want to save the world to sit in the dark by myself. I don't want us to perpetually be in this reductionist mindset about how we get to sustainability. My hot, long shower sets me up for a great rest of the day. So I want all of us to sort of start out from a place where let's find a way for us to have all of the things that we value right now in a smarter way. And so I also want to challenge everybody that if sustainability and technology was simple, we'd have everything figured out. So some people think success is so linear, but those of us that have been through some of these ups and downs know what it actually looks like. And sometimes there's a little bit of in between that gets you to where you are now. And so I come from a long line of conservers. My family is multi-generational, driven by conservation. This is my grandfather with 2 of his 14 children on the northern peninsula of Newfoundland. He did more with less and was far more sustainable than I can even hope to be, even though I've dedicated my career to it. I was raised with this mindset of doing more with less and making sure that there was no waste at the end. If I was to share with him now, he's passed away now, but if I was to share with him some of the technology that we're implementing right now on buildings, I don't know if he would really understand it. But his drive for conservation was a real part of it, mainly because he saw what happened when the fish went away. He was a cod fisher in the summer and a seal hunter in the winter. I also come from a long line of troublemakers. This is my mom and dad on their wedding day. They taught me to be brazen, tenacious, ask lots of questions, and if you can't figure it out, find the person that can and learn as much as you can from them. And so this is the only pie chart in my presentation, I promise, but pre-COVID, we were already spending 86% of our time indoors, 5.5% in our cars, and less than 10% of our lives outside. This has probably changed slightly since then, but we have this perception that we didn't spend nearly this much time inside pre-COVID, but in fact, especially in Canada, we spend a lot of our lives inside. So as it warms up and when it's safe to do so, go outside. Please fall in love and be reminded why we do what we do, because we need as many people with experience in construction, high performance building, sustainability to stick around and do the work that we need to do. So find that good news, because it is rare and you're gonna need a happy place, because there's a lot of work that we need to do. There are multiple lifetimes worth of work. You're definitely never gonna be without some work to do in this space. So prior to COVID, we already had a bunch of real traction that was happening in different areas of our communities across Canada. We, of course, had the climate change marches that were taking place. At the same time, as all of the Black Lives Matter conversations rose to the top of conversations of people that maybe had never considered equity in sustainability discussion, or queer and LGBTQ2+S communities within the context of sustainability. And so none of this is simple, but we need to make sure that it's sustainability for all, not just sustainability for the people that understand what that means, or people that maybe haven't had a chance to learn their place in it. And so the things that motivate me may not be the same things that motivate you, and that's okay, because we're not, maybe we're opening pretty soon, maybe not, I don't know. So we're gonna have to find these places where we know ourselves and where we can do the work that needs to get done. I also want to share with you that infection control has shaped our cities in the past. So most of our historic public buildings in Canada actually carry brass doorknobs. And I know that there's not a ton of really good research that talks about infection control in relation to the brass hardware and copper hardware that we have now, because it has coating and stuff on it that doesn't allow for the metal to sort of shine and do its infection control magic. But it was something that shaped the way that design in buildings in the past had been influenced. And so I also, this is an aerial photo of Paris. Part of Paris's restructuring and redesign was actually during cholera, to move waste away from where people lived so that they could manage some of that infection. So know that COVID is definitely going to influence. We can speculate all we want, but there are some teams that are finding ways to tie technology into going back safely into our offices. One of those examples is coming out of Cushman & Wakefield, and if you haven't seen this, this is from their global Cushman & Wakefield team. It's called the 6-foot office, and this was a relatively first sort of to market opportunity for them as they learned from their team across China. So they found improved air filtration is probably the single most important lesson learned from China, but you can see here in this slide, they also looked at how they could change the floor plate and the usage and how you can separate people far enough away, even in an open concept. Because we all definitely don't want this to end up creating a situation where we're all boxed in to walled up cubicles or office spaces again. So looking at these different opportunities, we're also seeing a lot of integration of health, wellness, and smart building tools that build off of AI. I'm not going to get too into that today, but there is some of this continuous monitoring that's happening around temperature. So the image on the left-hand side here is just an automated thermometer. They're just testing to see if people that are coming into the building have an elevated temperature. And then, of course, washing your hands, still important. I have very few rules when people used to come over to my house, but it was the one that was imbued in me as a kid, because I come from a family that had survivors that made it through other pandemics. And so we always had this thing in our house of washing our hands. It wasn't anything tied to something when I was a kid, but now it's just the thing that everybody is relearning the importance of, which sounds silly, but it is something that we all should just take it as a priority. Seems simple, not sexy, but good. So I also just want to talk about the impact of buildings globally and how that motivated me, just again, stating my biases, and also the things that excite me, because there's not a, there's not a lot of nerds out there that can get you excited. So hopefully by the end of this, you're not asleep and you're excited for change. So part of what's happening in the world around the World Green Building Council and the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs, is this real tight connection between how green buildings and those SDGs are tied together. So everything from good health and well-being, even pre-COVID, we knew that this was a part of buildings, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, not just looking at one building at a time, but looking at sustainable cities and equitable communities within that, looking at responsible consumption and production, so looking at circular principles. Some of you that are on construction sites, you're probably seeing more and more of your team, or even maybe some of your competitors that are looking more and more at construction waste. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And then green buildings that produce fewer emissions, so taking real climate action. Remember those climate marches I was talking about earlier that were becoming top of mind at the beginning of 2020? We've been doing this for a long time. Myself specifically, we're coming up on 20 years. So there's also something to be said about life on land, so green buildings can improve biodiversity, and then also the new leadership is partnerships. And I'm going to talk about that from a technology perspective a little bit later too. So through green buildings, we can create strong global partnerships, both within our communities, with business, and with technology. And so the art of governance locally also motivated me. So at the end of this conversation, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the really, really impressive support and financing that's coming out for new construction and retrofits. And so some of which is being announced right now through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So stay tuned for that later this afternoon. So the art of governance, both nationally, provincially, and locally, motivated me. I grew up in Edmonton. I'm a recovering Edmontonian. It's a great place to be from. And so within the context of being a sustainability specialist for decades in a somewhat not perceived as progressive environment, location-wise, I was able to be a part of some really important policy. And I'm not going to take credit for all of it, but it really showed me just the ability for us to use the art of governance to create meaningful, long-lasting change that was not at the mercy of whoever was in leadership politically at the time. And so on the far left is a urban beekeeping procedure and guidelines pilot program that I got to be a part of presenting to City Council. There's a sustainable building policy for the City of Edmonton that I was a part of for the first draft, and then when it was reinstated and updated in 2017. And then also what was known to be Bill 10, an act to enable clean energy improvements, which allowed for us, when the NDP government was in power in Alberta, for us to put in the foundation that one day we will see PACE financing in Alberta. And I know that there's a lot of great people working both at the City of Calgary and City of Edmonton to make that happen. So if you are at a loss right now and don't know how to engage with your city, your province, or federal government, there's a lot of places where you can make sure that your values are in alignment with the policy that you want to see implemented. Write letters, write as many as you can. So climate change may be too abstract as well, and complex. And I think that a lot of people stay out of these conversations because they think that they're going to be polarizing, they don't know where they fit, they don't want to use the wrong language. And so with this abstract piece, it doesn't help that there's all these technology pieces and acronyms and vernacular that nobody really understands unless they're deep in it. So only bar graph in the presentation, I promise. Coming from Alberta, what we were seeing, and this is great, this is from the Intech Center on Climate Adaptation. Blair Feltney is doing some great work over there. So this is cost of extreme weather, and whether you're concerned about climate change or not, insurance is telling us it's something to be concerned about. And so uninsurable housing market, and I should note that this is the cost to government and homeowners, and the chart starts when I was born and ends coming up on 2016. And you can see the Alberta and Toronto floods and the Fort McMurray fire. You can see the Ontario wind and rain. That is a trend on an upward curve. And so for us to really take climate change seriously, oftentimes we've seen bar graphs like this that don't really make it tangible. It kind of makes it hard to like communicate and get people that maybe don't really feel like they're a part of this discussion on side. So this is another example of how oftentimes this is shown. So this is how dirty the grid is in Alberta. This peak right here is when they're going to get off of coal and go to natural gas, but it's a pretty far dive to get us to zero carbon in Alberta, whereas Ontario, because of the geographic accident of this province having lots of ability for hydropower, we see these curves a lot different than we see. So this is 2005 here. This is on our way to 2030 on the front. And then this is the megatons of CO2e that we can expect. So lots of work in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do. And there's opportunities all over the place for technology to fill some of these gaps. And I don't mean future technology, I mean technology that exists right now. And I'm so glad that Bill shared some of that today. So there's also some art to small cities. And this will be the last time I nod to Edmonton, but there's a lot to be learned about just being able to work with people that are all trying to figure this out at the same time. And so I would like to invite anybody that's trying to figure out how to do zero carbon buildings, that when you figure it out, share it. We all need to pull in the same direction, and we need to make sure that all of this isn't sort of a precious snowflake like IP discussion constantly. We need retrofits and zero carbon new construction at scale. And so the art of small cities allowed for me, and let's be real, Edmonton's a pretty small town. It's like going to your cousin's wedding anytime there's an environmental event or a construction event, because you know everybody in the room just enough. So the art of small cities allowed for me to pick out who the troublemakers were in the room and who was willing to sort of take this on from a all hands on deck, let's try and figure this out. So when life gives you lemons, find the people that life gave sugar to and form a team. And so I had the opportunity to have been volunteering with Stephanie Carter and Andrea Pellet. And in 2006, we started EcoAmmo. We're celebrating 15 years this year, which is really exciting. And we were able to mobilize an entire impressive team of people. This building was built by Chandos Construction. It was delivered under budget, ahead of schedule, with integrated project delivery. It is LEED certified. It is all the things. It's net zero in a calendar year. And this is in Edmonton. So you can see some of the building integrated photovoltaics on the front. You can see that there's quite a bit on the roof as well. So for the nerds in the room that are wondering how we got there, especially in Alberta, so we have 213 kilowatts up on the roof, and you can see the solar modules are actually, the PV modules are actually flat, and we determined that we could get a little bit more out of it if each of the units weren't shading each other. So we put them flat, and we didn't clean the snow off, because what we found is that year over year we're getting less snow in Alberta, and it melts pretty quickly on these PV modules. So pretty cool. And then the building also utilizes geo-exchange. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the trends with geo-exchange in the GTA. But this is how the hot dogs are made. This is the secret sauce. Our ability to get to net zero in this project for both heating and cooling allowed for us to make the case for geo-exchange. It also provided us a cost savings of over $80,000 because we were able to properly size equipment, and then we were also able to utilize our rooftop, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Great, I'm doing good time. Somebody let me know if I'm too far over time or hitting things. You keep me posted. So I also just want to note around the art of governance, I ran for City Council in Ward 11 in 2017 in Edmonton, because I truly think we need leadership that understands the abstract realities of climate change and how they impact communities. And so I didn't win, obviously, which is totally fine with me. But I was in the top 3 out of 6 candidates for my first round, which is not a bad thing. And I set my entire platform on these sustainable development goals, because why not? I had a great team of volunteers, and we had a fantastic time door knocking and getting to know the inside outs of a political campaign. So if you've ever thought to run for governance, let me know. I'd be more than happy to share more. I also joined a great company after that election called View. Left EcoAmmo, they've got lots of good stuff to do. Ended up joining View. And if you haven't heard of View Dynamics Glass, you should check it out. They just went public after a long road towards IPO. And it's glass that changes from clear to tinted, and you can do it by voice on your smartphone through your base building system. They've also integrated a bunch of really cool new features, including temperature and indoor air quality testing and humidity and noise levels and dust and into the glass. And then they've also created, and I've linked all the links in here so that you can check this out after, but they've also been able to make the windows into displays that you can touch screen. So some really, really cool IoT technology pieces that also just happen to provide really great shading so that you can reduce your air conditioning loads in the building. And so really good stuff, lots of glare control. We all know about visual fatigue and thermal comfort and things like that. So with some of the announcements that are coming out of the federal government right now, a lot of them are hitting these targets for 2050. And I want you all to do some quick math. How old will you be in 2050? Think about that for a second. That's how much time we are saying we're going to take to get to zero carbon buildings across the country. And I can tell you, it's a lot of work to even get into 2050. And I am a serial optimist, but I think we need to do it faster. And thankfully, we have a lot of people that have already figured it out. So I'm going to share some of that with you as well. So this is what the last 30 years look like. Remember all these things that we used to have? I was raised by a dad who I lovingly call the inventor of the tinfoil hat. And we were not wealthy people, but we definitely grew up with a lot of these electronics. And so when was the last time you saw a VHS tape, right? Last time you used a corded telephone? The last time you used an actual AM, FM radio? So all of these things over 30 years fit in our back pocket. So we need to do the same thing to get buildings to be smart at this scale, in this timeline. Because this is Toronto in 1985. This is Toronto in the last 30 years. So let's do that again. 1985. Whoa. 2011. So there are a lot of these buildings that were built, designed, and are being managed the same way, maybe with some retro commissioning and some retrofits and things like that. But a lot of these buildings would fall under a category that we wouldn't consider them to be very smart. Some of them have integrated some really great technologies that allow for them to be smart even as existing buildings. So I also spent a long time volunteering for the Canada Green Building Council prior to joining the GBCI team. So the Green Business Certification Incorporated in Canada is the sister organization to the Canada Green Building Council. So now that you know a little bit about me, hopefully you can trust me and I can tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing roll out in Canada. And so GBCI advances excellence in green building and business by helping Canadian owners and developers and builders achieve their sustainability goals with globally recognized certification and credentialing services. So if you've ever heard of a LEED AP, that's through us. If you've ever heard of a LEED certification, I get to see those neat projects. So I have the benefit of seeing all this good news all the time. So I'm going to cherry pick a couple projects and a couple pieces of technology to share with you today. We also do a bunch of performance, benchmarking, and management, and I'll share that. And then we also do a ton of customer support. And so if you're struggling with anything to do with LEED certification, all my contacts at the end of this, don't be afraid to reach out. My title is Chief Customer Officer for a reason, and I'm here to tell you you're not alone. So we're seeing that a lot of people are motivated. Again, pick what motivates you and your team and go with it. It might be climate change. It might be the circular economy. It might be healthy and inclusive buildings. You might have a whole bunch of retrofits you're trying to figure out. You might be concerned about embodied carbon. Everybody should be concerned about embodied carbon. You might be concerned about smart buildings and how do you automate for greater insights and efficiency. You might be looking at energy storage, or you might be deeply concerned about indoor air quality and want to make sure that all sustainable materials are found on your project and that nobody's going to get sick from what is put inside your building. So certifications and platforms that I get to nerd out on a daily basis is LEED certification, True Zero Waste certification, Investor Confidence Project, and Zero Carbon buildings. The ARC logo that you see there is the platform that supports LEED certification for existing buildings. And so I'll talk about that as well. So some of you might be familiar with LEED. I'm not going to flog too much of a dead horse here, but it is proven. It's been around for over 25 years. It takes a holistic approach to deliver benefits, both around environment and economy, but also around health and wellness. It's always been baked in to LEED certification around indoor air quality and MERV 13 filtration and high ventilation rates and all these things that people are just learning about air quality needs right now. Who knew it was going to take a pandemic to get a bunch of non-mechanical engineers to learn about air quality, which is great. It's also market driven, and we try to do our best to work with those setting up government regulations so that we can inform them, but also be informed by the direction that they're taking. So lots of really great conversations around the Toronto Green Standard and the updating that's happening there, and a big thank you to the planning department for including us in those conversations. And then delivers meaningful ROI and financial returns. And I'll share with you some stories up here. So I also want to share that it's not just for new construction. There's a perception that LEED certification is only for new construction. It's also for existing buildings, tenant improvements, like commercial office build outs that you might now have to take up more floor area to get your people a little bit more distance between them. It's also part of residential construction for single family houses or multi-unit residential. And then it's also part of community development. So we are bringing to Canada what's called LEED for Cities and LEED for Communities, and sharing that with more teams that are trying to figure out how municipalities get to these deep carbon reductions. So these are some of the LEED users. Some of you might be on the call today. This is pretty much, it's all alphabetical also, just to, if anybody's wondering why it's in the order that it is. It's not prioritization of any kind. These are some of our REIT users, which is great to see. This is not a place that we oftentimes saw certification happening, and in the last few years, we've seen some real uptake in commitments. And then also from post-secondary institutions that, I froze there for a second, also creating some really impactful carbon reduction strategies within their capital planning. So if you're working with any post-secondary institutions, you're probably seeing them change some of their RFPs as well. And then we're seeing lots of movement and leadership coming from government. And so my team right now is actually meeting with PSPC. We had a meeting with National Defense yesterday. Some really impressive work that's coming out. And a lot of announcements. And if you haven't taken a look at greening government, there's a lot of really interesting metering and measurement and baselining and verification work that they're going to be doing. So I'll make sure to share that with the team when they send this out, because I didn't include it in this presentation because I didn't have enough time. But I also wanted to just address this perception of cost. So I've been doing green building certification officially since 2006, but I'd been learning about it since about 2000, 2001 and watching the trends. And I can tell you it used to be really expensive. It used to be really expensive to do a green building because you were probably importing things that you couldn't get before. Even simple stuff, like one of the first projects that I ever worked on that was LEED certified, we couldn't get low VOC paint. We had to import it from a manufacturer, like a boutique manufacturer in Quebec. If you're a homeowner and you're going to Home Depot, I dare you to try and find a high VOC paint, like a paint that actually has an odor to it. But so you're not paying for the learning curve or the products and materials that are far more expensive but not as durable, for example. You're actually, if this is the first time you've considered building a green building, you're doing it the right time in history, because everybody that has come before you has done a lot of lifting. And so this is a great, I've linked it in the presentation slides here, actual costs of buildings versus industry perception of costs. And this comes out of the World Green Building Council, and they're updating this right now. So we'll see some more numbers from it. But for some of you that maybe have in the past, I highly recommend you to take a look at the cost premiums, both perceived soft costs and hard costs, consultant fees, things like that. But I can tell you across the board, as somebody that came from the consultant world and is now part of this team, those costs have dropped substantially. And some of that has to do with some of the Lean Six Sigma, continuous improvement, integrated project delivery trends that we're seeing as well, where people are making that clear connection between cost savings, waste reduction, and high performance buildings around certification. I also, so this is adapted from Bentall Green Oak's presentation, just talking about some of the value that they defined around LEED certification. And so, especially around future proofing, we want to make sure that the buildings we're building right now are not, are still competitive when construction is complete. There is a lot of moving parts and a lot of changing regulations and a lot of expectations that are shifting very quickly. So we don't want buildings to be obsolete before their doors are even open. So the ability to adapt to future code, make sure that there's quality assurance in place. Yes, those operational savings is part of it, but I think the increased productivity and improved health and wellness pieces are the pieces that we should really elevate in the top of the conversation to encourage people back into the office. I know maybe it's because I talk too much all day long, but in my house, it feels like there's no air left by the end of the day because I don't have a professional O&M team that makes sure I have good filtration and air quality in my house. I am the de facto person for that, but it's something to be said about, yes, it's great to work from home, but after a while you realize that that productivity piece and the ability to see your peers and collaborate and have those health and wellness amenities is a big part of what we can draw people to the office. I'm even seeing some groups like Aspen Properties out of Alberta set up in-office dog programs and doggy daycares on the main floor and things like that. So let's do some creative things to get people back in the office. I also just want to note the old way of thinking about certified buildings of any kind, even if you're doing BOMA Best, like any certification allows for you to do what needs to get done in some form or fashion. So, but we used to look at only this top 10% operating costs as being how we build the business case for certification. And to be honest, what we needed to do was talk about this productivity piece of the 90% of salaries and benefits, which is most of the time the costs associated with somebody having a business. So this is the piece that we're seeing a lot more focus on. So looking at a broader lens. And then some of this cognitive function study is really worth a look if you're looking at how to bring people back to the office, how to make the case for all the work that you've done to construct a LEED certified building for better health. This study is already a couple years old. They've done a couple rounds of it now. It's really well vetted and allows for, could you imagine if you could get 26% more function out of your own self or out of your team? I would like that. So something to just make the case for people to be drawn back into the office. And then I also just want to, from an addressing COVID-19 perspective, just lightly here, we have some safety first LEED pilot credits that are worth taking a look at. We had a lot of people concerned sort of around their green cleaning policies being circumvented by some of the health regulations. So there is some UL registered and certified green cleaning products that still meet most of our national health standards. And then we also have an ARC reentry tool that allows for you to track infection control policies and procedures, portfolio-wide, collect and analyze occupant experiences. We can't test for COVID in the air yet, but we can track and measure indoor air quality proxies that allow for us to know if the aerosols from COVID are going to move around the building, and then add data and generate building scores if that's an option. I also want to let everybody know we have a bunch of adapted review for Canadian projects. So if you're struggling with reduced occupancy, we have a path forward for you. If you're struggling because some of your waste haulers have changed because they're not accepting certain things, let us know. You're not alone in this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about ARC and then some of our technology partners in ARC, and then open it up to questions. So ARC itself, if you've never heard of it, it's okay. It's mostly used on existing buildings, but what we're finding is that teams are utilizing it even pre-completion of buildings to set up and start to track before the building's even complete. So it allows for you to track a single project or create entire portfolios. It allows for you to streamline LEED recertification from the O&M existing building operation and maintenance side, and then performance certificates. So if you have buildings that are existing buildings that you're retrofitting that maybe are going to hit certain targets and achieve certain things, but maybe you're not quite ready for full LEED certification, then you can get incremental certification. So you can go for the energy credits or you can go for the water credits as you do your retrofits. And then it's also rating system agnostic. So you can put LEED projects on, well, my best projects on, well projects. You can put it all on there and then track and compare LEED certified, uncertified space, buildings with other certification systems, things like that. So what we're trying to do is not duplicate people's efforts, but rather consolidate into one platform all of these different data sources. And so we can all make better informed decisions. Database decisions are really great, but you need to make sure you have good data. And so we're just trying to make sure that there is a one-stop shop that is very collaborative, and we try to have as many technology partners as we can so that any kind of certification you're going after is streamlined. And so it tracks energy, water, waste, transportation, and human experience. And that human experience piece is what I was mentioning about indoor air quality or acoustic or thermal comfort, things like that. And then you get a score generated based out of 100 points. 80 of those points, so 80% of the certification, is based on performance through ARC. So we're really starting to hear from the community that this performance focus, the future is performance based. It's great for us to design and build these buildings, but if they are not performing, we need to know why. And so we need to get away from this idea that we hand a sports car over to somebody without a driver's license. Our O&M teams are fantastic across Canada, but sometimes with some of these new systems, it's really hard to do the knowledge transfer necessary, especially with some of the turnover that we have within the operations teams. So making sure that this is something that allows for us to track and streamline. And then it is for all buildings, so you can put any building on here, and then you can do recertification. So there's scoring, there's the incremental certificates, and then you can run all these reports. And these reports allow for us to do some of the partner integration that we're doing. So I mentioned the reentry stuff. I'm just gonna glance over that just to make sure. But just to make sure we stay on time. But optimized performance with ARC integration partners is a big part of how we make this work. And so it's leading technology companies that provide tools to make ARC faster, easier, and more scalable. So in the next few slides, if you see somebody that you're working with that's a technology partner not listed here, let us know. We have been adding tons of different teams to this platform over the course of the last year. So of course, if you're already using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, you can back and near real-time automate into ARC. We also are working with Measurable, who I'll talk about, Beeline, who I'll talk about, of course, all these other teams on here, RB & Co. We just added AutoCase, Risk Footprint, and Bracelet to the team of partners, and we continue to add more. And so AutoCase is actually a Toronto-based company, and they're automating the business case for smarter buildings and infrastructure design. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at what they're doing, and I should say, I'm not here to sell you on any of these partners. I'm just really excited to have the opportunity to have them integrated to scale up and streamline where we need to go, which is make the business case for sustainability and retrofits and deep carbon reductions, and then get to it and do it. So AutoCase itself, and some of this I'm just keeping in the slides so that you can reference it later, but it's the first automated triple bottom line cost benefit analysis software for new buildings and retrofits. And what that looks like is traditional analysis oftentimes looks at the upfront cost, replacement cost, utility savings, whereas AutoCase looks through a broader and wider lens. So just like carbon, the same valuation monetization can be done for other impacts like air pollution, occupant health, flood risk, and more. I know if any of you are keeping track of all of the flood map updating that's happening right now, a lot of our flood maps haven't been updated since the 50s, 60s, 70s in some regions. There's a lot of work to be done there so that we're not building in floodplains. But AutoCase also looks at operational costs, embodied carbon, operational carbon, sequestered carbon, air quality, property value, occupant health, urban heat island, water scarcity, flood risk, all these pieces that previously were externalities to the business case. And so the ability for this automation to take place in a very transparent way through their software, directly linked into ARC, is something that I am really excited about. We also have a partnership with Measurable, and if you haven't taken a look at Measurable and you have meters and measurement and verification sort of distributed throughout your portfolio, and maybe you have different things collecting different KPIs, take a look at Measurable because it will make your life a little bit easier. So it also allows for you to utilize some of the ESG software and trends that are being deployed. I'm sure a lot of you didn't know what ESGs were a year ago, maybe two. Maybe you're just getting to know them now or putting out your first ESG report, but they already have a lot of projects that have kicked the tires. And so if you're looking for a tool to utilize, take a look at Measurable, because it's the buildings of the future, right? Allowing for us to use this data to transform real estate and allow for it to be something that is data driven. And then RB&Co actually looks at real-time indoor environment quality and reports back. So allows for us to automate this. And I know that there's a lot of people that are really looking at wearable indoor air quality sensors. So things that you as an occupant can say, ooh, this is not a safe place for me to be because the CO2 levels are really high or the humidity is whatever. So as design and construction professionals and maybe building operators and maintenance and investors and all the folks that maybe are on the call today, it's great for us to have real-time indoor environment from a quality testing and reporting to tenants so that we can have the peace of mind that we're reporting to them data we have control over, because indoor air quality testing can be simple, but it can also be really complex. And so if we end up in a case with a bunch of people walking around with wearable indoor air quality testers that haven't been calibrated or maybe have some issues with them, we might start getting into a litigious place where people don't feel safe about the buildings that they're going through because of the wearable indoor air quality meter. So I'm a big fan of RB&Co because it allows for us to standardize and make sure that those indoor air quality sensors are working properly. And then Beeline is one of the last things that I'll share with you before I talk about funding, because I know I'm a little bit over time. But this allows for us to have a little bit more facility management and contact tracing platforms for infectious disease prevention, but also allows for us to do a lot more for tenants when they actually do move in to these buildings once they're completed. So it allows for facility management, occupant management, contactless entry into buildings. This can be a new building or an existing building, contract tracing and emergency platform preparedness. So something that allows for you to near real time alert all occupants on their own devices of an emergency, whether it's an evacuation or somebody has been diagnosed with COVID. So some of this is pretty seamless integration, doesn't look all that complicated, and you're ready to go. Couple screws, no problem. I can do that for you. No, I'm just kidding. But just around some of this the perception of smart buildings is that it's deeply complex and that you have to do all this work to make your building a little bit smarter. Some of it's simple. And it allows for you to also discover exactly who and when somebody's checked in or out, allowing you to know instantly how many people have gained access to your building, how many have come in, how many have come out, so that you can keep to those health regulations of the percentage of people you can have in your building. And then if you have key fob access to meeting rooms or different floors in your office or all these different things, it can also help you sort of keep track of some of the, and it's normalized data. There's all these protections and privacy things, check it out. But it allows for you to have a little bit more control without having to have sort of like a hall monitor checking on all these spaces. So we want to have a safe and seamless reentry, and this is one of the tools that we can do it from a smart building perspective. I also, for all the folks from the construction side and the site side of things, I know you may not be a big fan of all the documentation that comes along with LEED certification. So Green Badger is absolutely fantastic. I've worked with them in the past when I was on the consulting side. It was a really great way for us to deploy and simplify documentation on site. And so all of these pieces allow for you to track on any device. It can be desktop, sure, but it can also be iPads or iPhones or smartphones of whatever choice you want to utilize. But it allows for this real-time instant verification of things like waste reduction, around the products materials that are utilized on site, things like that. So they made claims around 65% time cut on LEED paperwork. Our experience was in alignment with that, and sometimes a little bit better. So really good opportunity for you to even streamline your own processes if you're looking at that. So doing all these things, it's that risk mitigation piece for me. It's really important for us to have good data tracked on projects so that they're actually certified properly. So last but not least, I just want to say there is a real trend happening in Toronto right now around something that is just a sleeping giant under our feet. And I want us to think about the planet for just a second. And I don't mean like the aliens are coming kind of thing, because we're all seeing all these pyramids on the news and wondering what's happening. I'm not too worried. Who knows? But what I want to point out, that was a joke. What I want to point out is just the trend towards exchange, geothermal to some, but being utilized on so many types of buildings. So this was National Post just a couple days ago. There's a growing number of condos utilizing solar and geothermal energy. This is Tridell's Aquilina, and I'll talk about it in just a second. There's a link to the article. There are so many great Toronto projects that have been highlighted in this. Share it wide. And this, so I borrowed this from Tim over at Diverso Energy. So the opportunity to utilize geothermal to get, and I'm not selling you on geo, I'm just letting you know it's an exciting trend that's happening that ties the smart building thing a little bit deeper into some of our mechanical systems. But also, as we have a warming summer, it's May and it's 21 degrees outside, for us to really manage our heating and cooling better. So stay competitive, future-proof, lots of construction savings, and the opportunity for us to bring more over into Ontario, dare I say. So we have a bunch of drilling rigs that are doing nothing in Alberta right now. What if we could take that expertise from my home province and bring them on over to do a bunch of geo drilling? That's what we did on the Mosaic Center, was utilize people that had deep experience in oil and gas. That was a geo joke. And deep experience in oil and gas to retool to the green economy. And so this is the plant. One of the things that I want to mention is it's mixed use condos, 74 units with retail and office on the floor 2 levels, but they don't have rooftop units because they have geothermal. They actually have a rooftop garden and a beautiful amenity space that allows for them to utilize that top floor in a different way that maybe before was just static with rooftop units. Also, this is the Aquilina Bayside. It's also carrying the LEED Platinum certification, but if you haven't had a chance to take a look at their NetZed, I've put a link in here. Take a look at it. Hines and Tridell did some really impressive work to get this Aquilina Bayside Suite smart, and it should be where we're all aspiring to go towards. I also just want to talk about greening government real briefly. So there's some really good announcements happening. Just Google Canada Greening Government and you'll get more information than you care to know. Just wanted to highlight it for you. There's also a bunch of, oops, sorry, out of order. So low carbon and retrofit financing announced. I'm gonna leave these slides in here for the Toronto Construction Association team to distribute to you, because there are links that you should take a look for either upcoming projects for yourself or projects that are currently seeking financing or funding or looking for a way to make the business case for implementing maybe some of these smart strategies. So one of them is the Community Buildings Retrofit Initiative. It's $167 million over 6 years, specifically around building monitoring and analysis, recommissioning, GHG reduction pathways and feasibility studies, and capital funding. And so this is where you can start to make that case for allowing smart technology to fill some of the gaps on some of your existing buildings. So there's no fixed deadlines and applications are being accepted on an ongoing basis. So take a look. The program is for not-for-profit organizations that own and operate community recreational and cultural facilities, and it's focused on implementing retrofits. There's also some really exciting stuff coming, 1.5 billion over 5 years. There's, again, no fixed deadline for projects under $3 million for retrofits. Funding, well, this is retrofit and new construction. So funding is provided on an ongoing basis for projects under 3 million, projects between 3 to 25 million. The deadline is July 6th. And so it's designed to spur green building through retrofits, upgrades, and new construction of public institutions. The applications have to come from municipal or regional government. So if you're working with governments that are looking for financial support for some of their projects just after, you know, the waves of COVID and how people are a little bit tighter for their budgets. It's also focused on Indigenous community prioritization, public sector bodies, not-for-profit organizations, and provincial or territorial governments. And new construction requires the project to follow zero carbon building standard, which I have included in here as a few reference points for you. I also, yeah, that's right, I'm giving you homework. So there's also some really great stuff that is being announced as we speak. So the Canada Infrastructure Bank, we have been waiting to be able to share this with you and other folks in our industry. but they have earmarked $1 billion in financing for decarbonization for retrofits in privately owned commercial, industrial, and multi-unit residential buildings in Canada. There's no fixed deadline. The minimum threshold is $25 million. So they're looking at large retrofits. And this can definitely include a lot of the smart technologies that allow for us to have a better sense of metering and measurement and what we do with that information. Scheduling has a lot to do with it too. And so the initiative is open to two kinds of applicants. So you can see I'm obviously excited because this has always been the barrier, is how do we pay for it? And then there's also a public infrastructure retrofit initiative that is set to be announced. It's not announced yet, but if it's something that's of interest to you, this is another $1 billion in financing at least. So the deadline is to be determined, but if it's something that you're working on, if you're looking for financing for Indigenous community projects, schools, hospitals, university projects, it can be a broad selection of projects here. So if you need more information, please do email the CIBC. And so part of those programs require the Investor Confidence Project as a way to get there. So it's a roadmap for industry best practices. It's not to duplicate efforts, but rather consolidate them. So I've included a few slides here for that as well. And I gotta tell you, we already have some teams utilizing this tool called Investor Confidence Project to streamline. So last note, I know we're at time. So every morning you have two choices. You can continue to sleep with your dreams or wake up and chase them. We need all of you to do the best work you've ever done in the next 29 years as we get to 2050. Thank you all. Here's my contact information. Don't be shy. Reach out anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brandy. Thank you very much, Bill. Jeff, I don't think we have any questions.
No, we had one question.
Mm-hmm.
One question that was put in there. I hope everybody is not going to be shy. If they have any information they need, contact Brandy or Bill. They're available. They've got a lot of knowledge and they're up to date on what's going on. Thanks to both of you. The only other thing I just had a question, Brandy, regarding the ARC program. Is that similar or different to the WELL certification?
It's like, oh, am I muted? No, there we go. So they're not the same, and that's okay. We work quite collaboratively with the WELL team here in Canada. Most of the WELL certifications also carry LEED certifications or have come through our certification team at GBCI. And similar consulting groups and ownership groups that are utilizing. You're talking about the WELL health and safety rating, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so similar intents, you can definitely put WELL projects on ARC.
Okay.
Okay, so on behalf of the Toronto Construction Association, thank you very much to our speakers. This was very informative, very interesting, and exciting. I think hopefully there'll be a lot of money flowing down shortly, and I hope everybody that viewed these presentations will access that money, or at least try to, and let's get this going. Let's get these things built. I'm chair of the Toronto Construction Association's Environmental Committee. I'm going to plug the committee now. We're looking for members. In addition to putting on this seminar, we put on a seminar on ASHRAE and standards and COVID-19 in May. And there is a joint Young Construction Executive and Environmental Committee seminar on excess soils, brown soils, coming up in June. You'll see all of these on the Toronto Construction Association website and in our newsletters. And if you would like to join our committee, the Environmental Committee, we're there to connect the construction industry with environmental education, awareness, best practices, guidelines, and policies, while encouraging and promoting a culture of environmental sustainability. We have a lot of fun. We're looking for members. Now is an ideal time to join, please. Also, if your organization or a company you know is doing something good for sustainability and the environment, please consider nominating yourselves for a green ambassador. Every month or most months, we put up on our website a company that's doing its part in sustainability and for the environment. And there are green ambassadors, and you get your company profiled. We hear what you're doing, and it encourages other companies and gives them ideas for what they can be doing. I think City of Toronto will be our green ambassador for June because they're doing phenomenal work. And if you're doing something either internally or externally, please nominate yourself. You can send something to me or send something to Vishon at the TCA, and we'd be happy to post what you're doing. And that's all I have to say. Shortly, you'll receive a survey from TCA through Vishon regarding this seminar. If you have questions, please feel free to send them through that email. And if you're interested in some of the slides or contacts that either Bill or Brandy provided, please also make those inquiries, and we'll be happy to send them to you.
And Catherine, I'd like to add that we have, as far as the Environmental Committee, we have connections to social media. We have a blog, and we want any and all activity, please.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Okay,
Brandy.
enjoy. Chat
Thanks,
soon.
Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.